22 minutes after 10 o'clock in the Mountain Time Zone, you're listening to News Talk 1310 KFKA's Amy Oliver Show. Ladies, go warm up your wardrobe. Actually, get some color in there. Accessories with the flair and Hare, 1335 8th Avenue in Greeley, famous A-frame, west side of the street. Spring is rapidly approaching. Get those fabulous spring colors now. Yesterday, I was in committee. Of course, yesterday was a little chilly, but nothing like a hand-painted silk scarf to make those winter clothes or those February clothes, just to put a little bit of pop in them. So get to accessories with the flair and Hare. Visit my great friend Linda Winter, famous A-frame, west side of the street, 1335 8th Avenue in Greeley, on the web at accessorieswithaflair.com. Please tell her that Amy Oliver sent you. I want to get right back to Jeffrey Hare. We're going to get to the legislation. Finish up your story, though, about your personal experience with your metro district. So you and the members of your community, you felt you didn't have any say over where the money that was coming into the district, where it could be spent. So how did this progress? What happened in your own district?
Well, one of the criticisms of metro districts is lack of transparency in the voting process. So when we learned that we could serve on one of the two boards out there, we actually went through a recall process to recall some of the developer.
Who had the developer? Who was on the board before you guys went to the recall process?
It was a combination. They had allocated a couple of seats to residents. There was a couple of residents, but it was controlled by the developer. And this one in one of the two boards. The other board we couldn't serve on at all because of the way the metro district was structured, legal structure. You
couldn't serve on it. You had no say on one of the boards,
right? And that's a fairly common scenario with metropolitan districts. Is the developer structures the board? And there's multiple ways of doing this where residents cannot serve on the boards that make the decisions
about your community,
about the community, or there's other communities that provide water and sanitation services. Where the developer can control water and sanitation process, and the residents or people within the service area can't serve on the board or vote for the people on the board.
Real quickly, explain how the voting process or how you get people on a board. How do they get elected? Because I think it's at a whole separate time of year, correct?
It is, yeah, and that's part of the process. Part of the problem is people don't understand it's an off-cycle election, so we're going through that right now. Nominations are happening. The voting process, I think, is in May this year, so it's not even related to the normal voting process. So unless you're knowing it's there, unless you know that, for example, the call for nominations, all it has to happen is a post, an ad in a newspaper of general circulation in the area. It doesn't have. There's no public notice that has to go out on that. So most people that live in metro districts have no clue that these elections are even happening unless they've been very involved, unless they go to the meetings on a regular basis, which may or may not be convenient for them to go to.
And do they have to post notice about the meetings? Does that go into a newspaper of general circulation? So maybe that could be, I don't know, a weekly paper or something that it doesn't. In other words, it doesn't have to be bold print saying, "Hey, Metro District meeting." Is that sort of
the meetings have to be posted in the community? It's the voting process of when the elections come up and the cycle happens, and the process for that. Who's the designated election official is. It doesn't have to be posted in your community.
Okay. So what happened in your own district? You did a recall election.
So we did a recall election. We got all the signatures we needed. The DEO, the designated election official, deemed the petition to be valid. And then just prior to the election going forward, there's a clause in the statute that allows the people to resign as opposed to the recall election going forward. So it set off a legal response in our community as opposed to allowing the recall election to go forward and getting control of that board. The developer concocted a scheme to be able to restructure the district. They did an inclusion and exclusion process that tried to further provide a buffer for us to having control under what's happening with spending and revenue. That ended up that decision was approved by our board. We actually appealed that to the Board of County Commissioners in Weld County, who voted with us on that, in that they felt that the inclusion process or exclusion process was inappropriate. That case then got appealed to the district court.
Let me ask Justin, who's still online, Justin Longo of the Independence Institute, who wrote the paper on metro districts. Justin, did you find that this sort of lack of transparency is a universal theme with these metro districts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the statistics are sobering and astonishing at the same time. I mean, when I was doing my research, Jeff is right that the letter of the law says that elections have to be advertised, so to speak, in some circulation that is worth something. I mean, but it could be small and on the back page. So what happens is the elections take place in May, and they are allowed to take place outside of district boundaries. So this
what do you mean?
Explain
that. Outside of district boundaries?
So if your metro district is in Jeffco, you could have your election in Denver. That's allowed.
How do you do that?
It's allowed by law. I don't know. I'm sure it happens because what I found was that an average of 76% of the elections were canceled prior to 63 days prior to Election Day. So what the law says is that you don't have to have the election if 63 days prior to Election Day, there are not more candidates running than there are spots to fill. So then there's no point in having an election. So what happens is 3/4 of elections don't happen because people don't know about it and therefore don't want to run. Therefore, there is not more people than spots to fill, so 76% get canceled.
And they can actually occur outside of the metro district boundaries. That's
yes.
I'm sorry. That's almost laughable. That is actually allowable. That would be acceptable when it comes to election. Can you imagine if the Colorado election were held in Wyoming? I mean, that's ridiculous. All right, real quick, Jeff, what happened then in your life? So you recalled. Were you able to make peace with your developer, or is there still a battle going on, or how has your situation been resolved?
Well, that's another half-an-hour story I could tell you about it, but we ended up with the help of the county, in essence, allowing for what's called a quinquennial review, which is a review of the service plan and the financing plan. It provided us as residents a little leverage to renegotiate the terms of the service plan. So over about a 2-year period, a lot of detail and history behind that I could go into, but about a 2-year period, we renegotiated the terms of the service plan. We agreed upon what we felt was a reasonable revenue split between the residents controlling. We got control of operations and maintenance. We got control of a portion of money that goes towards future amenities. The developer got a portion of the money for future infrastructure.
So yours is actually kind of a good news story in the sense that your developer, whoever the developer was, you guys worked out an agreement. Does that happen all the time?
Well, I would say this type of restructuring is very rare from what I've heard. And we became very knowledgeable about the statutes, and we had a county commissioners that were sympathetic to our situation, and so they provided us some leverage through this quinquennial process. So I think that's a very unique situation. I don't think that, frankly, many other communities in the state have done this, and there's very little leverage you can get in those circumstances. Once you're in it, it's kind of like the Roach Motel. You cannot get out.
It's like Hotel California. You can check out any time you like, but you can't ever leave.
Yep.
All right, I'll tell you what. We're going to take a quick break, and then we need to get to this legislation that has been introduced, will be heard in committee on Monday. 10:31, the time in the Mountain Time Zone. We've got to check in at the 24-hour news desk, get a bottom-of-the-hour news break, and then back with more on metro districts with Jeffrey Hare and Justin Longo of Complete Colorado.